An important step in the development of any musician is learning how to improvise effectively. However, a lot of the advice surrounding this subject often seems to come down to something along the lines of you've just got to feel it. And whilst this may be very well meaning, it's a little bit vague and can often leave people a little bit lost in terms of how to actually get started. So I've got here a couple of techniques and suggestions if improvisation is completely new to you. So the first thing you're going to want when you begin improvising is something to play along with. Now, strictly speaking, I suppose you don't need something to play along with. You could improvise completely unaccompanied. However, I think you might be pushing your luck expecting other people to want to listen to that. And also, music is about joining in. It's about playing along with other musicians most of the time. And there are all sorts of things you can learn with regards taste and timing that you only really get when you are playing along with something else or someone else. So we could go the typical guitar route of E minor or A minor, but well, let's live a little. Let's go to B minor. And I have a loop here set up in B minor, which sounds like this. Now, yes, that is only one chord, and yes, most songs do venture out into more than one chord. But we've got to start somewhere, and this should serve us pretty well. Okay, so the first thing we're going to want to do is establish the key and how we're going to accompany the piece of music in that key. Now, as I said, our loop here is in B minor, or it is a B minor chord. So we're going to need to play something that fits within the key of B minor. So nothing too complicated so far, hopefully. I suppose what we're talking about here mainly is lead improvisation. It's by no means the only thing you could do, but it's usually where most people start. So we'll do that. The obvious candidate here is the scale we all already know, the minor pentatonic, in the key of B, of course. Just in case you don't, however, we're going to start this at the B note at the 7th fret on the 6th string, and then 10th fret. Then to the A string, the 5th string, we go 7, 9, then on the 4th string, 7, 9 again. Then on the 3rd string, 7, 9, yet again. And then on the 2nd string, 7, 10. And then 7 on the 1st string. Right, so we have our song and we have our palette of notes that we're going to use to accompany that song. So the next thing you're going to want to do is establish a sense of rhythm. A very, very easy step this. All we need to do is just latch on to the pulse of the piece of music we're playing to. So in this case, as I say, very, very obvious step, where we're just getting going. And then, what I would recommend doing is just playing your scale in time with the music. So you're basically treating that like a glorified metronome. Go 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, it would be a very generous listener that said that was a great guitar solo, but as I say, very, very important to take this one step at a time. And as a brief side note, if you'll allow me, I would personally recommend steering clear of anyone who claims to have invented a system that enables you to master the fretboard in 10 minutes or any of this kind of thing. Sorry to disillusion anyone, but this really doesn't work like that. It's very much a marathon, not a sprint. and all of that. But once you've done that and established the pulse and are playing to it really steadily, then you could try a different sort of a rhythm. Let's try doubling up and playing what I would call a quaver rhythm. Or what is called a quaver rhythm, I didn't invent that. So that would be like this. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. So still very much just the scale, but we're playing around with the rhythm a little bit more, and most importantly you're getting a real sense of the feel of the music you're playing to. So once you've done this for a little bit and you feel very comfortable grooving along with it in that very kind of simple way, then the next step would be to add a little bit of phrasing. Now what's meant by this is simply breaking up the notes you play into smaller phrases, a bit like a singer would. So very, very simple way to do this would be to just simply work your way up and down the scale in the same way, but leave gaps. So something like... Now again, we're still playing the scale and we're not going to fool anyone into thinking otherwise, I don't think. But hopefully you can hear already it's getting a little bit more musical just simply by having it in those phrases. So this element of phrasing is where we get into feel territory. It's a very individual thing. It's not like there's a right and a wrong way to break up your phrases. It's just something for you to experiment with and get your own sense of. Now, one other little detail I would recommend adding in these early stages of learning to improvise is breaking up the order of the notes a little bit, so it's not quite so predictably a scale. One thing you'll hopefully start to notice if you mess around with it in the way we've outlined already is that certain notes within the scale kind of sound a bit better than others at certain points. None of them, if we stick to the scale, will sound dreadfully out of tune, but there are some that will sound more restful than others. Now, that's not to say they're better notes, it just means they give you a different musical effect. And when you're playing the scale up and down, just try and pay attention to that, to how certain notes work in the context of the music. So, for example, we'd probably all agree that this note sounds very tuneful, it sounds very at rest, and that's because it's the root note of B minor. However, this note is not a wrong note, it's in the scale, but I think most people would agree it's a very different musical effect. We're kind of ramping up the tension by leaning on that note quite so heavily. There's a sense we need to go somewhere else with it. To resolve the idea and complete the phrase. So when you're playing up and down the scale, just notice how certain notes make you feel. And if it sounds like you want to linger in that area of the scale, then do. So you might still start at the bottom of the scale. And we're just starting to go up and down in smaller areas within the scale. So in some respects, we're working a lot less hard. We're not feeling we have to cover the whole scale. And that starts to sound a lot more musical if you just spend a little bit longer in each area of the scale. Like here. Now there are of course many other aspects to improvisation and lots of other approaches we can take, which I will explore in later videos, but I think there's a lot to be said for doing really simple stuff as well as you possibly can first. So I hope there are enough ideas there to at least get you started. Really hope this was useful. If so, please consider liking and subscribing, and I'll see you again with something else very soon. Thanks a lot.